What's up, everybody? Rob here. So, Ireland has a very long and bloody history. Celts, Vikings, Saxons, Normans, and a host of other people have all attempted to invade and subjugate the Emerald Isle. In this bubbling cauldron of near constant conflict, a very particular breed of warrior was created. And I'm not that good at transitions, so here we are, a very, very brief look at the Gallowglass. Now, the history of the Gallowglass does not begin in Ireland, but in Scotland, or more specifically in the Hebrides, along the western coast. In the 9th century, the Vikings, because, it's always the Vikings, they settled in that part of the British Isles and mixed with the locals, creating a Norse-Celtic hybrid society called the Gael, which means something along the lines of foreigners that speak Gaelic. Now, these are tough as nails Viking warrior types who were more than happy to hire themselves out as mercenaries. And a large number of them ended up in Ireland, where they became known as and here's my obligatory I suck at foreign words warning, Gallowglass, which means young foreign soldiers, because that's exactly what they were. They were foreigners to Ireland, and, they were young soldiers acting as mercenaries. The first mention of the Gallowglass was in 1259, when the King of Connacht, that guy, he received about 150 warriors as part of his dowry when he married the daughter of the King of the Hebrides. Now, at this point in history, Ireland was under near constant invasion from the Anglo-Normans, or basically the English, who were very eager to add the island to Plantagenet rule. Now, traditional Irish warriors were lightly armed and lightly armored skirmishers and raiders who would basically skirmish and raid. They were fast-moving, lightly armored troops armed with javelins, slings, bows and arrows, short swords, daggers, that sort of stuff, short spears, light spears, designed for lightning raids. Now, these are, good for that particular type of warfare, especially in the mountainous terrain of Ireland. Yes, fine, when one petty king is trying to, say, raid another petty king or something like that. But they found themselves grossly outmatched by the heavy shock cavalry of the English, who were supported by heavy infantry with thick shields, lots of armor, and, basically it's a typical medieval army. The lightly armed and equipped native Irish troops really simply were not capable of competing with this. So that's where the Gallowglass stepped in. Now, I'll get into details about their armor, their equipment, and their tactics in a few moments, but suffice it to say for the time being that they were heavy infantry, and they were used as a bolster to the lightly armed and equipped native troops. Now, like I just said, Ireland was made up of multiple petty kingdoms. It was not a single united kingdom, but just multiple warlords who were constantly at war with each other, as well as against foreign invaders. And each king and warlord maintained a household of Gallowglass warriors as bodyguards, and also as a corps around which the bulk of his military force would be arranged. The Gallowglass themselves organized themselves into hereditary groups who, if they served well and pleased the lord that they would work for, would become nobility as a reward for their service. Now, this was a family business. Gallowglass would train themselves from childhood, usually under the tutelage of a cousin or an uncle or something like that, and that was their only profession. They did not have any trade. They did not do anything else. They were born and bred fighters. That is all they ever did, and many of them were rewarded with nobility and became part of the Irish nobility. Now, they were mercenaries across Europe for many centuries. Sometimes they were even faced against one another. Like I said, these petty kingdoms would go to war with each other as often as they would go to war with, say, the English, and the Gallowglass would be right in the thick of it. They also fought abroad. For example, there was a contingent of Gallowglass that fought in the Wars of the Roses on the Yorkish side. There were also multiple Gallowglass regiments that were raised and used throughout the Wars of Religion in the 16th century. Now, the Gallowglass would march off to battle with two attendants. Typically, there would be a weapon bearer, which was very similar to a squire, who would, carry his weaponry and equipment and basically maintain and take care of it. And there's an implication there that this squire, this weapon bearer, was a warrior in training. And there would be another one who carried food and other provisions as well. Why they didn't just get a pack horse, I honestly don't know. I guess there are spare people just laying around. They're probably cheaper. Who knows? But in any case, there you go. Now, this three-man group was known as a spar, and on the battlefield, they would organize these spars into groups of about 2 to 400 men, who would themselves be supported by the native Irish warriors and cavalry. Now, the weapon bearer and the food bearer, I'm not sure. I've not yet to find any evidence to show that they would actually charge in along with the Gallowglass himself. The weapon bearer, at least, he would be armed with a spear and possibly a long knife or dagger, maybe a sword or something. Whether he participated in the charge or this was just a self-defense thing, I honestly couldn't find out. It would make sense, though, that they would. I mean, if he's is a warrior in training, then, well, yeah, I mean, it would make sense for him to charge in. But yeah, he would be much more, both these attendants would be much more lightly armed and equipped than the Gallowglass master. Now, the main role of the Gallowglass was that of heavy infantry. They would often be armored with something like a long chainmail hauberk and a very thick, heavy iron or steel helmet. The weapon of choice for the Gallowglass is what you see here. This is called a Sparth axe, which is a descendant of the Dane axe, which belies their Norse heritage. As the centuries progressed and technology changed, the Gallowglass would often wield two-handed claymores. Now, they would use other weapons as well. They would use swords, one-handed swords. They would use shields on occasion. That would happen, yes. And in later centuries, they would use firearms. So they would be one of the earlier adopters of it. However, it seems that the large two-handed axe and the two-handed sword seemed to be their mainstay. That was pretty much their reputation, and that was almost their trademark. Now, this belies a recurring theme throughout any sort of mention of Celtic warfare. Julius Caesar and a number of other Roman writers have described the Celtic method of warfare is you get a bunch of guys together and you have them all rush towards the enemy all at the same time. I think they called it the Furor Celtica, the Celtic Fury, which is exactly what it sounds like. You get a bunch of guys, they all charge the enemy, and they could possibly carry the day. They just run with massive amounts of force. However, if the initial charge doesn't work, they break and run. This is also something similar to the couple centuries after the Gallowglass. You have the Highlanders in Scotland in the mid 18th century. I'll maybe do a video on those guys eventually. But they had something called the Highland Charge, which is actually very similar. They get in close to the enemy. If they had muskets, they would fire the muskets, and they'd use either, well, earlier centuries they would have claymores like this. They usually would have basking hilt broadswords, possibly a targe and a dirk or something like that, but whatever. In any case, they'd fire off this one volley, point blank range, and then rush in. And if that didn't work, everything, like what happened at Culloden, that didn't work. And everything just sort of went to hell from that point. So, likewise, the Gallowglass were anything but subtle. Celtic warfare in general is not subtle, and Gallowglass were no different. I mean, you have something like this. This is a claymore. Now, I can use this as a, similar to a longsword. I can go through the positions. Now, I'm not very good at this. We have all the guard positions, and I can parry. I can do all that stuff. But this is a weapon of just sheer brutality. It's very heavy. It's kind of weighted a little bit more towards the front. So parrying and dodging and ducking and maneuvering, it's not going to be that easy. This is, I want someone split in half. Okay, that's what this is a weapon of. Something like a Sparth axe, anything like a big two-handed weapon. They're not using shields. They're relying on their passive defenses, on their armor to stay alive, and hopefully just having the force of action to just carry the day. And there are multiple chroniclers who talk about the Gallowglass who say that the Gallowglass are exactly that. They will charge in, they would hit their enemy, and then they'd either stand their ground and completely wipe out the enemy through violence of action, or they would be defeated. There's not very much in terms of retreat or advance and then fall back and tactical acumen or anything like that. It's just massive punch. It's kind of like to use a boxing metaphor. It's kind of like these guys are punchers and not boxers. A puncher is somebody like I don't want to say Mike. Well, the usual comparison is Muhammad Ali versus Mike Tyson. Now, Mike Tyson is highly skilled. He's more skilled than people give him credit for. But Muhammad Ali's he's a boxer. He's moving. He's doing the rope-a-dope. He's got the shuffle. He's ducking punches left and right. Tyson's not really doing that. He's just going there right in the center of the ring and he's smashing people. Now, yes, he he's way more skilled than people often give him credit for. But really, it's that particular style. It's just get out there right in the middle and just use raw, brutal, overwhelming power to completely, brutalize your enemy. All right, so this is just a really quick look at the Gallowglass and how they would be used in warfare. So right here you have a generic enemy group. They are Perry Miniatures Wars of the Roses set, and yes, that is foreshadowing for a future video a couple months from now. I got a lot to do to put that together, but it should be pretty interesting. But doesn't necessarily represent enemies from that particular time period, just, generic bad guys that the Gallowglass need to destroy. And over here, representing the Gallowglass and the Kerns. The Kerns are the name for the native Irish warriors, small skirmisher types. I'll get to them in a minute. You have my Warhammer miniatures. You got the Gallowglass here, represented by the Armageddon Steel Legion. And the Kerns on the outside will be Cadian shock troops, planted before the Guard did. So over here you have the enemy force. They're in a nice, neat, organized formation, relatively speaking. And they are ready for battle. And here you have the Kerns and the Gallowglass. Now the Kerns on the here, again, represented by the Cadians. Now the Kerns, taking up the flanks, would also have a light horse as well. Would not be heavy chargers. These would be small, almost pony-sized horses they would use. In any case, they would be light skirmishers. They wore little, if any, armor, maybe at most something like a gambeson or an Akatan or something like that. And their job would be to skirmish. They would be armed with short bows, something called a self bow. They would have javelins, slings, anything like that, and usually a short sword or a dagger of some kind. Very lightly armed, very lightly armored. Occasionally, they would even be barefoot as well, which means they were very fast, very mobile, but can't really expect to stand against an enemy. So in the opening stages of a battle, the flanks, the Kerns and the light horse would move up, and they would, of course, look, yes, I know you're Imperial Guard, you don't have to fall over just yet. They would advance along the flanks, and they would skirmish. They would use their bows, they would use their javelins, and their main purpose here would be to disrupt the enemy formation. So, enemy formation, I don't care how brave you are, I don't care how you're armored, you get a stone, an arrow, a stone from a sling, a javelin flying towards your head, you're going to duck, you're going to move, so your formation's going to break apart. Or you're going to duck even closer behind your shield wall. Point is, though, people are going to die, people are going to get knocked out. It's not going to do a tremendous amount of damage, but it is going to cause major disruptions. Now, if the Kerns, if the enemy did advance towards them, the Kerns wouldn't be able to hold up against them, so they would simply withdraw. Likewise, on this side, on this flank, let me just clear this flank out. They would withdraw, but the enemy's forces are in shambles. Now, it's a natural human reaction to want to chase somebody. So if the Kerns are fleeing, like you see here, yes, people would want to chase after them. Now, it depends on how disciplined the enemy is and a whole bunch of other circumstances. That's really not the point. But once the enemy formation is broken apart and the situation, once the timing is right, that's when the Gallowglass would show up. So the Gallowglass here, they would often be deployed in the center and usually at the front of the line in the van. So they would then show up, and into these gaps in formation, they would simply blow it apart. And I'm doing this one-handed, so no, it's not elegant or glamorous at all. This is more of a test for, again, something in the future, but you get my point. They would blow apart the center, and they would use their giant swords, their giant axes, and simply shred virtually anything that comes near them. And with the enemy's formation broken, the enemy would often turn and run. Now, the Gallowglass are heavy infantry, so they're not going to be able to pursue a fleeing enemy. So that's when the Kerns, who had fallen back, and the light cavalry, they can then pick apart the stragglers. And thus ends the enemy advance. And that is a very simple demonstration of the Gallowglass and how they were used. Of course, situations may change depending upon this, the circumstances and numbers and everything else. But more or less, that's kind of how they were used.
The Kerns and the light cavalry would act as skirmishers, break up the formation, and then the massive, kind of like a jab, to use a boxing metaphor again, they would jab, set up the enemy, possibly even hurt them if you have the enemy behind a shield wall of some kind. If you're constantly under missile attack, you close ranks, you get even closer. You can kind of herd them to where you want them to be, and then you send the Gallowglass in. It's the big overhand right, the big uppercut, and you smash the enemy, and then the Kerns and the light infantry would then be used as a cleanup crew to just pick off stragglers and finish the job. The Kerns could also charge in if the Gallowglass were being overwhelmed, or if you need that little extra push to drive the enemy over the edge. They could engage in melee combat. They did have some close quarter weaponry, but really wasn't their specialty. Could happen though, should the situation call for it.
So, to sum it all up, the Gallowglass were Vikings who mixed with the Scots, ended up in Ireland, and became the backbone and pretty much the figurehead for Irish warfare during the Middle Ages and the early modern era. And that's pretty much it for the video. Hope you liked this very brief introduction into the Gallowglass. Hit the like and subscribe button. More videos will be coming out whenever I get around to it. I'm not going to lie to you, it'll happen when it happens. Until then, have a good day. Or don't have a good day. You're adults, have any kind of day you want. It's your choice. I believe in freedom. See ya.